Hello everybody, Trevor here, and welcome to another top 10 video. Remember my top 5 video on the unpopular cartoons I like? Well, here's my question. Have you ever watched a movie you happen to like but everyone else hates? Well, that's the subject for today's video, my top 10 movies I like but everyone else hates. And since this is a new month and I'm taking a break from Thomas stuff for a while, I'm going to change my avatar to a pony. Because as you all know, I am a brony. I, for one, am one of those people who likes to think with an open mind when it comes to bad movies. Now, believe it or not, there are a lot of them that I enjoy watching. And it's not just because they're so bad they're good, but because I can't help but feel nostalgic for them. Of course, not all of these are bad movies in my opinion. They're just movies I think deserve better reception than what they've got. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, then that's totally fine. But just understand that it's just my silly personal opinion. And if we all have the same opinion on everything, then life will be boring and uninteresting. Now for this list, I'm only going to pick at least 10 movies that were either box office bombs or just simply bad movies that I think are enjoyable to watch. Oh, and keep in mind that some of these aren't my most favorite movies of all time, except for a few, but I'll get to those later. But I can't help but feel nostalgic for them. Now with those things out of the way, let's begin this awesome top 10. Number 10. Thomas and the Magic Railroad. I've decided to put this as number 10 because I've talked about it at least 3 times on my channel. The first time I reviewed this was in my every single Thomas movie and special reviewed video. Then I made a further thoughts video on it in a later time just to elaborate more on what I like and don't like about it. And lastly, I've even gave a review on the 20th anniversary DVD/Blu-ray edition, which came out in fall of 2020. In addition, I personally would love to see a fully animated remake of this but split into various episodes so that way we could add in more cut content into the story, including the backstories of Burnett, Tasha, and P.T. Boomer. I also thought of a way to make Thomas and his engine friends have more screen time than the humans. For example, Thomas can be the narrator of this remake series, and he'll tell the whole story to his friends at Tima's Sheds, and even make up the magical elements as if they never actually happened. That way, we can end the debate whether Thomas Magic Railroad is canon to the TV series or not. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on Thomas and Magic Railroad, then I suggest you watch the first 3 videos about it on my channel. Links will be provided in the description below. Number 9. Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland. I've already talked about this in my top 5 anime review, and I'll try to keep it brief here. And don't worry, they're not all going to appear from previous installments on my channel because I don't want to sound like a broken record. Little Nemo is about a little boy who enters Slumberland to become the royal heir of King Morpheus, but must save the kingdom from the evil Nightmare King. While I may not have read any of the original Nemo comics, but in my opinion, I think this movie is fine enough on its own because I love the characters, especially Nemo, as well as the good animation, songs, and its message about learning to keep your promises and taking responsibility. In other words, I love this movie growing up, but the reason I put it as number 9 is because, once again, I already talked about it before in my top 5 anime video, so let's move on to number 8. Rudolph the Movie by Good Times Entertainment. Okay, this is the last movie that I'll be mentioning from a previous video, so I'll try to keep it brief here. If you've watched my top 12 favorite Christmas movies video from last year, then you know that I love this movie better than the original Rankin Bass version. And once again, no offense to the people who grew up with the original 60s version, but I prefer this 1998 remake for a number of reasons. 1. Zoe has more character development than Clarice. 2. Whoopi Goldberg is an awesome Stormella. She's not as scary as that abominable snow monster from the original. 3. With the redesigns of the reindeer and elves, at least you can tell them apart from each other easily, unlike in the original, which are mostly clones. And 4. My most favorite supporting character in the entire movie is John Goodman's Santa Claus because he's much nicer and more accepting of Rudolph than the old stop-motion Santa, who acts like a jerk. In conclusion, this is the best adaptation of Rudolph ever, and despite its flaws, I still recommend it with your family and friends because it's not as cruel and mean-spirited as in the original Rankin Bass version. Number 7. Tom and Jerry the Movie, the original 1992 version. This is Tom and Jerry's first theatrical film, and it stars the famous duo on a journey of rescuing a little girl from her mean Aunt Fig and mean lawyer Lick Boot, and to take her home to her father's cabin by the river. Before I give my honest thoughts on this, I want to explain why the movie failed miserably. For one thing, Tom and Jerry talked for most of the movie. Two, the plot is basically a ripoff of Disney's The Rescuers in terms of rescuing abused children from abusive adults. And three, because of the movie's plot as well as Tom and Jerry's talking for the most part, it just makes them out of character. While those are good reasons to hate the movie, but I can't help but feel nostalgic for this movie because, one, I thought the animation was pretty good. Secondly, the songs are pretty catchy and memorable. Some of my favorites include What Do We Care and Money's Such a Beautiful Word. 3. I honestly don't mind Tom and Jerry talking for the majority of this film because they have talked occasionally in the classic shorts. It's not like this is the first time. And you have to admit, Tony Jay as Lick Boot is the best performance in the entire movie.
We've got to have money.
Overall, I think this is a cute and funny family film. And whether you like it or hate it, I still think you should add it to your collection, if you're a die-hard Tom and Jerry fan like me, that is. Besides, it's still a better film adaptation than the boring live-action one. Number 6. Space Jams 1 and 2. Like Tom and Jerry the movie from the 1990s, Space Jams 1 and 2 are also guilty pleasures of mine. Let's talk about the first Space Jam movie. The premise is that the Looney Tunes were being invaded by aliens, and it's up to Michael Jordan to save them by competing against the Nerdlucks in a basketball game. When I was little, I never got a chance to see this movie in the theaters or on VHS. I don't know why, but thankfully I gave it an honest chance by watching it on TV in the 2000s. And I thought it wasn't too bad despite its problems. For example, I love the 2D animation as well as some of the slapstick that the usual Looney Tunes have. Sure, they may seem watered down in this movie, but unlike Lunatics Unleashed, at least they're still the Looney Tunes we all know and love. I also enjoy Danny DeVito's performance as the main antagonist as well as Kath Soucie as the new character Lola Bunny, who is Bugs' love interest. But Space Jam is not without its major flaws. For instance, the CGI effects, particularly on the humans, hasn't really aged very well because it makes them look freaky. And as much as I like Lola in general, she's kind of bland in this movie when it comes to her personality. Thankfully, they fixed her in other future projects like the Looney Tunes show. Also, I can kind of understand why Michael Jordan didn't enjoy participating in this film, which explains why he never returned to the sequel, which I'll get to later. Overall, despite Space Jam's faults, I still think it's quite fun to watch. One of my favorite moments would have to be Sylvester saying, "And we got balls!" Hilarious in hindsight indeed. And I can see why some people still like it to this day, besides me of course, because it inspires them to play basketball. However, that's not one of the reasons why I like this movie, because I'm not a sports type guy. Now let's move on to its sequel, Space Jam: A New Legacy. While the original Space Jam came out in the mid-1990s, this one came out in 2021, and this time, the main hero is LeBron James, who replaced Michael Jordan. Like the first movie, the 2D animation in this is really good, but it's too bad that one of the animators didn't get credited for it because I thought he did really well in the film. I also enjoyed the CGI effects in this one, which in my opinion are an improvement over the earlier CGI graphics in the first movie. And I'm always a sucker for newer and updated graphics in movies and video games. However, like the first movie, it also has its major flaws. For example, there are too many references and cameos in the film. Some of them worked, like the DC universe, as well as Iron Giant and King Kong, while others like Rick and Morty are quite questionable because they belong in adult-targeted shows and movies, not kids' stuff. And in terms of the live-action characters like LeBron James and his family, even though that's not his real family in the film, they're alright for the most part. However, I did enjoy Don Cheadle's performance as Algae Rhythm, who is the main antagonist of this film, and bad guy performances are usually well acted than some of the good guy characters. But aside from the problems, I still enjoy this movie as much as the first. The CGI effects are better, the 2D animation is as beautiful as the last film, some of the humor is quite funny, and I thought Algae Rhythm is pretty interesting. In other words, I can't really hate Space Jams 1 and 2 because they're Looney Tunes movies after all, and I have a lot of respect for the characters themselves. Besides, I still think Lunatics Unleashed is the absolute worst thing to come out of the franchise. Number 5. The Pebble and the Penguin. Most Don Bluth films from the 1990s weren't very well received. However, there are a few I quite enjoyed even back then, and The Pebble and the Penguin is one of them. Allow me to explain. This movie is about a penguin named Hubie who wants to find a pebble for his girlfriend Marina just to impress her. When he finds a glowing green pebble that came from the sky, he sets on an adventure with his new friend Rocco to return to Antarctica to save Marina from the evil clutches of Drake, voiced by Tim Curry. In my opinion, this one is a slight improvement over A Troll in Central Park, at least in terms of character development and humor. For instance, I love the interaction between Hubie and Rocco throughout the movie because they're a hilarious duo in my eyes. Not to mention that Hubie lied to Rocco about finding Waldo just to convince him to come with him to Antarctica. Fun fact, Waldo is actually a reference to a cartoon character from the Where's Waldo book series, and in my opinion, that was a funny pop culture reference. While the film itself does have its flaws, but I can't help but enjoy it not only because of the wonderful animation, but also because of the characters and some of the songs. 3 of my favorites would be Now and Forever, Sometimes I Wonder, and The Good Ship Misery, because those I remember the most as a kid. In conclusion, The Pebble and the Penguin is slightly better than the previous 3 Don Bluth films of the 1990s in terms of humor and characters. It's not perfect, but I suggest that you give it an honest chance, just so you can understand what I mean. Number 4. The Star Wars Prequels. These consist of episodes 1, 2, and 3. And in my opinion, I don't think they're as bad as what most people make them out to be. Let me explain why. While the prequels have their flaws, including cheesy and corny acting, as well as certain characters that are annoying and useless, particularly with Jar Jar Binks, even though I kind of like Jar Jar Binks actually. But unlike Disney's Star Wars, they actually have consistency, which is the only thing I care about when it comes to Star Wars lore. Another thing I love about this trilogy is that it helped me pique my interest in the original trilogy. I wasn't that big on the original trilogy in the first place until after I gave episode 1 an honest chance in the theaters. The reasoning is silly. I was a little scared by a few things, and there were moments that I did find a bit weird, especially with the aliens at Jabba's palace. But nowadays, I appreciate the original trilogy more after doing some research on the characters, as well as giving the prequels an honest chance by watching and paying attention to the plot lines that lead up to episodes 4 to 6. A perfect example would be how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader in episode 3. And those are all the reasons why I still love the prequels to this day. In fact, in terms of consistency and characters, they are much better than episodes 7 through 9 because we all know how bad they were. Number 3. Various Illumination Entertainment movies. These include the franchises of Despicable Me, The Secret Life of Pets, and Sing. I've decided to include all these into one candidate because I honestly thought their movies weren't that bad to begin with, or at least most of them anyway. Despicable Me is Illumination's flagship, and it's about a supervillain who decided to raise 3 orphan girls and would later reform in the end because of them. I liked the first Despicable Me because it's sweet and heartwarming, and at least it's trying to be original. I especially thought Steve Carell does a great Russian accent for Gru. While I haven't seen the others yet, but I did see the first Minions movie, and I thought it was okay for the most part. I just wish they added English subtitles to the Minions gibberish, but I still prefer the original Despicable Me nonetheless. I also liked Sing's 1 and 2 because I thought the celebrity voice actors themselves have wonderful singing voices. And at first, I thought the first Sing movie was going to be dumb, but after giving it an honest chance, I enjoyed every bit of it, especially with the subplots of various characters like with Johnny the Teenage Gorilla, who wanted to free his dad from prison and didn't want to follow him in his criminal footsteps. But my most favorite Illumination film would probably be The Secret Life of Pets because I love animals, especially dogs, and I'm sure some of you know why I love them so much. If I get into full detail on all these, then we'd be here all day. If you want more information on these movies, then I suggest you watch Animat's defense video on Illumination in general. So, in conclusion, I think most of these movies by Illumination deserve better credit than what they've got. I mean, at least they know how to make profitable movies. I also think that the hate for them is a little bit unwarranted. I mean, there are other films I think deserve more hate than what they've got. Number 2, The Magic Voyage. This 2D animated movie made in Germany is about the story of Christopher Columbus. And to be honest, I love this movie for a number of reasons. One, I liked the voiceover performances, especially Dom DeLuise as Christopher Columbus, as well as Corey Feldman as Pico the Woodworm. Unlike the real-life Christopher Columbus, who was a bit of a tyrant, the one portrayed here is kind and friendly, and very accepting of his new friend Pico. Sure, he may be a doofus in this movie, but that's what makes him hilarious in my eyes. 3. The Swarm Lord is a pretty interesting and well-animated villain, and it was quite hilarious that he got defeated by getting squished by Columbus himself. 4. Half of the songs are quite catchy and memorable, particularly Life of the Sea and Heaven Is. The latter song, which was used in the ending credits, was performed by the late Al Jarreau, wherever I would pronounce his last name. It's too bad you can't find a full version of the song on the internet because it's so good, and it's the best song out of all the other ones here. And finally, I love the absurd humor in this movie. One of the funniest moments in my opinion was Columbus's dream sequence where he pulls a spyglass out of his groin. I mean seriously, how did that get past censorship? However, there are a few things I don't like about this movie. And it's not just because of the rushed dubbing and lack of lip movement in some scenes, but there are certain characters like the three rats who only serve as filler, not to mention that there are certain other characters like King Ferdinand's royal advisor who only appeared a few times in the film and never appeared again after that. Seriously, what's the point of these characters? If they don't further your story, you should lose them. Oh, and the movie doesn't have any silent moments unfortunately, which I never noticed until Doug Walker pointed that out in his own review. Overall, while I do understand why many people hate The Magic Voyage due to its historical inaccuracy, as well as the crappy editing, but in my opinion, it's one of those movies that's so bad that it's actually good, like The Room bad. The humor is absurd, the characters are funny, and the latter half of the songs are better and more memorable than the first two. It's one of my favorite bad movies, and therefore, I think you guys should check it out for yourselves for these reasons alone. Now, before I get to my number one pick, I'm gonna give out a bunch of honorable mentions. Quest for Camelot. It got beat out by Space Jams 1 and 2. While I did enjoy this as a kid, but looking back at it now, there were some story elements that weren't explained very well. The Black Cauldron. It's okay, but not the best PG-rated Disney film because it could have been a lot better. Cats Don't Dance. I'm saving my thoughts on this movie on a later date. Gumby the Movie. For one thing, it got beat out by Tom and Jerry the movie. Secondly, looking back at it now, it's got like mean-spirited moments like with the dog crying out pearls. Not to mention that the animation is old-fashioned compared to other 90s stop-motion films like The Nightmare Before Christmas. But hey, I don't want to hate on it too much because it is a Gumby cartoon after all, and I have a lot of respect for Art Clokey whether for the better or worse. The Jungle Book 2016. I was originally going to put this as number 1, but because it was already well received by most critics and audiences, I've decided to omit it from the list. Sausage Party. While I enjoyed the film for its premise and humor, but the only things I hate about it are the forced fourth wall break at the very end, as well as the behind-the-scenes controversy where the animators in Canada were forced to work overtime for free by director Greg Tiernan, who I used to respect before that incident happened. The original Spider-Man trilogy. They got beat out by the Star Wars prequels because, I'll admit, they have their major flaws like the plot holes and cheesy moments here and there. But I do like the memes going for them, especially with the guy who played J. Jonah Jameson, who has the best performance in the whole trilogy, by the way. Lightyear. It got beat out by Star Wars as well because if I did add it on the list, then chances are I could get backlash from some of my fans and subscribers, as well as the haters. But you have to admit, the best new character in the entire movie is Socks the robotic cat, because he's cute and hilarious, and very smart too. And the number one movie I like but everyone else hates is Once Upon a Forest. This 20th Century Fox film is about a group of young animal characters known as furlings who set off on a quest to find a cure for a sick Michelle who was poisoned by the gas. I don't know about you guys, but I love this movie from the bottom of my heart, even though it's an environmental film from the 1990s, but you must admit, the animation is really good, even for Hanna-Barbera standards. I also love the cute and likable characters, especially Cornelius, who was voiced by Michael Crawford, whom I think does an excellent job with his voice. In addition, it's got heartwarming moments like the happy ending where Michelle finally gets cured by the flower medicine, as well as the families of Abigail, Russell, and Edgar coming back home from the forest disaster. Not to mention that even the music itself was tear jerking. While the movie may only have 3 songs, but my 2 favorites are Please Wake Up, sung by Michael Crawford, and the ending credits song Once Upon a Time with Me. Man, they make me feel so emotional. The reason this is number 1 on the list is because, according to Rotten Tomatoes, it received a 22% score based on 23 reviews. Oh, and by the way, Rotten Tomatoes is a horrible, irrelevant website, so don't take their opinions too seriously. I don't care what anyone else says about Once Upon a Forest. Like Little Nemo, this was also one of my absolute favorite childhood films. In fact, I think it's better than Ferngully in terms of how mankind was portrayed in the film. Not that I hate Ferngully, but still. So therefore, if you want to see an environmental film that's great for kids, then I would recommend Once Upon a Forest because it's so good. Now let me know in the comments section on which unpopular movies do you like. Do you agree with my list, or have you seen better? But please don't rag on me for having some unpopular opinions on movies and shows. And like I said, just because a lot of people hate a certain piece of media doesn't mean I have to hate it too. And again, if we all like or hate the same old thing, then life will be boring and uninteresting. That's why it's good to have different opinions. Anyways, this is Trevor Davis, signing off.